and welcome to Out of the Darkroom on Adorama TV. I'm here in Photo London 2015 and joining me on the show today is legendary music photographer Sheila Rock. Sheila was born in America but spent the majority of the 70s here in London photographing the iconic punk rock movement. She's going to be sharing some stories about the time she shot Blondie and The Jam and Paul Weller, and also talking me through her new book, Tough and Tender.
Adorama TV presents Out of the Darkroom with Ruth Medjber.
Sheila, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. I'm a big fan of your work, so I'm really interested to hear about all of it, your entire career. Maybe just fill us in a little bit on how you got started in the industry.
It was totally by accident. I think I'm an accidental photographer. I started shooting, I think, in the early 70s. I inherited a camera and I happened to wander into the King's Road. And I met, I guess, the person that introduced me to punk. And in 2013, I came out with a book called Punk Plus, which I seem to have documented the entire punk, the early genesis of the punk time. And I wasn't on assignment. I just found everything so fascinating and interesting. But earlier on, I had the opportunity of going on the David Bowie tour. And so I met the most extraordinary people then, and all the people in the punk movement that were hanging out at CBGB's, Debbie Harry, Richard Hell, and was able to get a gist that something really exciting musically and in fashion was happening. And then it was translated in England in a more visual way. The English embrace style in a much more upfront, dynamic way. And the product of my journey, and really as a young girl, hanging out with friends who then weren't famous musicians. And I just happened to be at the right place at the right time, very much a fly on the wall. And, you know, it would be, a typical scenario would be, I would go down to Acme Attraction, and it happened to be the Bromley contingent were there. And I just thought they looked extraordinary, had my camera, and just asked them if I could photograph them. Yeah. And then I continued to do that because I did get a sense that there was something interesting happening. What transpired is that all of these pictures, apart from maybe John Lydon a little bit later on, and The Clash, and The Clash, the pictures of The Clash, that was the first money I received for a photo. Wow. I happened to go to their first gig at the ICA, and I met Bernie Rhodes and the band, and I kind of asked if I could go and photograph them again. And Bernard said that they wanted to see my contacts, and they ended up buying a picture for £50. From that early genesis, I was suddenly asked to do more photographs of bands. And then the Face magazine gave me the opportunity of working. And that just completely launched my career. I then suddenly realized I was a photographer.
Looking through your work, and it's quite varied, you know, through your entire career. Obviously, you know, the punk and Punk Plus was, it's iconic, and there's lots of imagery in there that it's still being used every day. When I was flicking through your portfolio online, I'm like, I know this shot, and I know this shot, and they're still using this, you know. Right. So I mean, everyone must be a big fan of your work. You must have a way of representing someone truthfully if they're still, you know, 20, 30 years on still using that image. I mean, do you get a lot of like repeats, I suppose, people coming back to saying,
oh, very much so. I mean, the image of John Lydon in the red coat, I think he likes that image. Yeah. It was used in his book. Yeah. And lesser known artists like Joe Wobble have used images that I have done of him. And they seem to have a kind of classic lasting appeal, even with musicians or punk, radically maverick sort of people. Yeah. I seem to have been able to capture a moment or a feeling or an attitude.
how have your practices changed now? Because you've just brought out Tough and Tender, which is your newer book, and we'll have a little flick through it in a bit. So I presume, you know, you've kind of honed your craft a little bit more than that, and it's not just
well, I spent quite a lot of time learning about lighting. Again, I'm very self-taught. Okay. I would ask a lot of questions in places like the equivalent of Adorama. Then it was Keith Johnson, you know. And I would ask these technicians about filters, films, and they would give me cameras for the weekend. Wow. I'd hire something for one day to just test out. They'd say, take it for 3. Wow. They're very kind. And so because of that generosity of spirit, and because I obviously showed an interest and was very grateful, I benefited. And even lighting, someone said to me, oh, I think you would benefit by learning about movie lighting. Wow. So I went to a higher place for movie lights, and they said you could use whatever you want, just pay the technician £50 and he will be on site for half a day. Wow. So he came with a truckload of equipment, and I just tested it out, HMIs, Kinos. I didn't really know the lighting. Okay. I had an assistant. My assistant would be my model, and both he and I were learning how to use this lighting. A lot of my special projects that are on my website are things that, again, were from the same spirit as the early punk. I decided that I was getting a little stale. I was doing things more in the studio, and I happened to do a photograph of David Attenborough. And so I decided, I found it very interesting what he was saying to me, because you build a relationship over a period of time as you're working with someone. Just setting up lights and building a confidence between you and your subject. And he inspired me, and I thought, I'm going to take photographs of horses. Wow. And I decided I'd do it the way he would do, which was sit in a field for a day and wait. And that was not like my style. And then I thought I would do what comes natural to me. I would bring a studio to a stables. And that was the genesis of creating all of those portraits, which were very different from other people. I was doing the Tibetan monks, and that was by chance. I happened to be in India. I had chanced upon this monastery, and it was a kind of inner calling that made me think, I've never done anything like this. So I started to do the project, and then the more I did, it drew me back. And the same with Tough and Tender, my new project. I decided that, having had the opportunity of being in England for a very long time, spending a bit of time on the coast, I'd never done any landscape photography. So I started doing seascapes, just as an expression of my journey as a photographer, trying something else. It's a kind of learning process. And then I happened to show some of these pictures to a German art director who basically said, these are lovely, they're very atmospheric, very arty, but I know Sheila Rock is a portrait photographer. Where are your strong portraits? And it was like the light bulb went off. Really? And I thought, oh, I'll revisit some of these places again, and then focus more on portraiture. And it sort of added a certain kind of gravitas to the project. And it, again, like the Tibetan monks, it kind of brought me back. It began having a life of its own. I think it's, I think when you create a series of images, it almost has a life of its own. It's like part of a creative process. And that process brings you back, and you begin to revisit. And every single time, something extraordinary happens. Either the people you meet, the picture you get, you know, the amazing kind of light that you see on the day. Yeah. You never come away empty-handed, I think. Yeah. since I've been doing these personal projects, I've tried to capture a feeling, a spirit, a kind of energy from the person, to make a strong connection with a horse or with someone from the Isle of Sheppey, because I think that that's important, rather than being a documentarian, which was very much the punk thing. I was a fly on the wall, I happened to capture an amazing time. I wanted to kind of dive deeper into
I think you can feel that, especially with your Tibetan work and then the seaside portraits, that you are in there with these people and that you've made this personal connection with them. And
thank you.
You know, you can see that reflected almost in them. And it's a really fantastic body of work. And thank you so much for sharing your stories with me today. It's been my pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you very much.
Can't wait to see more of your work, Sheila.
Great.
Thanks. So that's all we have for this episode of Out of the Darkroom from here in Photo London 2015. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you have any comments for me, please feel free to leave them below. I do appreciate the feedback. If you want to brush up on your own music photography skills, visit the Adorama Learning Centre, where I know there's a good few articles on the subject. Also, if you want to subscribe to the YouTube channel, please do. I'm going to be bringing you back some more great videos from Photo London 2015. See you soon.
Do you want great looking prints at low cost? Be sure to visit our easy to use online printing service. Adorama Pix has professionals who treat your images with the utmost care that you can count on. For a quick turnaround on photos, cards, or albums, use adoramapix.com.